It's scary. That's scary, huh? I'm gonna turn it around because I couldn't get my camera. Yeah, I was gonna use that. Yeah. Nobody ever watches it. It's backwards. Your eyes are about as red as mine. Could use a bottle of water. Batteries. Amateur. Mhm. Goodness. My EOS utility didn't work. You, Mary Beth. Whoa.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
You guys are awful.
She called you, Dad.
She called me?
Yeah.
When? When did she call me? No, did you say call me?
I'll be back. Oh, no, I see.
Oh, good. I've got my darks. Mary Beth, don't shake the table. Yeah, I can probably see if that horse head came out. Man. Did you find yourself taking out way too much gear? And then you get a tangle of mess. That's not hard. Yeah. Did you get me something to eat?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. It's not very keto, but I guess keto's gonna have to wait. Mmm. That's that really expensive stuff with caviar in it. The coffee with caviar. It's so strange.
Too bad. I can't put it back. You want it? Who wants it?
Okay, so that doesn't work.
But the lab don't want to still fly.
Nice test.
Oh, is that your camera?
Yeah, I was. Well, this one's actually live streaming right now.
Oh, is that your
This is for star parties.
Oh.
When people are taking photographs, you shine this all over the place. Not write your name on your pictures.
Wow.
It's a very courteous thing to do.
Where does that actually do that? Don't let her have a
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Yeah, I set it up so it will dry out. We'll see if I'm streaming on YouTube.
Yep.
Hmm? Try not to shake the table. We're quite tight.
Tag me.
Yeah.
Is it on that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's why I told you to put a shake in it.
Yeah.
I'm already getting mad. Hey, nothing streaming.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was left there. Did you leave it there yesterday? No?
I didn't even sit here. I don't think anyone sat in the corner.
Okay, somehow. You log in Facebook.
Good morning, folks. So we are at about 9:01, so I'm going to go ahead and get this kicked off this morning. So first off, for those of you that were not here yesterday, I want to welcome you to Astrophotography Weekend. This is the first annual event held for Astrophotography Weekend. Along with that, we plan to start a new nonprofit that will be called West Virginia Astrophotography Association. That's what the sign-up sheet is for. If you feel like you make a monetary donation to get that kicked off, we have a donation right back here on the table. Aaron, raise your hand real quick. So the sign-up is there to be informed about that, and also the donation button. And just a little bit about the Astrophotography Association. We were actually born from the All Valley Astronomical Society. And from them, they hold an annual star party here in September. This year will be September 14th and 15th. So kind of easy to remember, matches the dates for Astrophotography Weekend. So this year for that star party will be the 34th year that we've held it. So I'd like to invite all of you back for Astronomy Weekend in September. Have a great list of speakers. The schedule's not quite ready yet, but if you keep tabs on apas.org, go to the events page, we'll have that posted out there as soon as it's available for scheduled speakers. So one other thing, actually I have two things. One administrative change for our schedule, if you look at that, we had Jeremy Plumgarden that was scheduled for 11 to 11:45 today. Unfortunately, he showed up yesterday and had a severe something with his eye. So it was completely shut. He did bring his browsers, so we have those, but he will not be speaking today. Brent Maynard spoke with him last night. Still good for doing a presentation. Okay, so we'll do a brief talk there. Any time that's left, I'll open it up for a general question and answer period. I'll go over something last night for those of you who were here, those that are new today. It's called a sky camera here. That's one that was made, it's made out of Raspberry Pi, we'll get into that later. So I don't want to cut any time short for our keynote speaker today. I'm going to jump right in and we'll take whatever time he needs. right over. So I'd like everybody to welcome Nico Clark. And Nico, just a little bit about him. If you've not heard of him, please go on YouTube first at some point today and check out Nebula Photos. He is one of the founders of the astrophotography movement, as I'm calling him, as of recent years. So, digging right in, just to brief about Nico has always been a camera nut. After graduating college with a degree in filmmaking, he traveled around the world and first fell in love with photography, the night sky while shooting war in Iceland. He now works full-time in astrophotography education and runs a successful YouTube channel that aims to help beginners get started with astrophotography. So one more time, a round of applause for Nico.
All right, good morning, everyone. So thanks to Bill and the whole KKS for having me down here. It's really a pleasure to meet everyone. And what a night we had last night, right? That was excellent. I don't think any of us were really expecting a night like that based on the forecast, and we all had a great time at the Star Park. So today I'm going to be talking about free astronomy software. And there's a lot of free software out there that's actually really excellent. But I'm going to be talking about my pet faves, because the thing that I really like to do in astrophotography is bringing out the biggest details. And I'll get into a little bit about what I mean by that in this presentation, but I'm going to try to spend most of the presentation time actually demonstrating free software so that you can sort of get an idea for how it works. But then all of my slides, as well as downloading these pieces of software, are available at these three links. So if you are a note taker or want to take a picture of this, this is the only thing you'll have to know in terms of this presentation, because you can find all the details right here. It's tinyurl.com/SIRIL2023. And when you go to that link, it's going to have a PDF of this slide deck, and it's also going to have what's called a .fit file. And that just means the astrophotograph that you can then practice on. It's the one that I'm going to be showing today. And then up here, there's two links, CIRIL.org, SIRIL.org, and StarNetAstro.com. And those are for downloading the software that I'll be demonstrating. And for anyone that hasn't heard of either of these, let me just actually quickly say what they are. CIRIL, S-I-R-I-L, is a full astrophotography package, right? So you can stack your images in CIRIL, but you can also do the post-processing, so bringing out the colors and all of that. It's sort of akin to PixInsight, which is a paid program. It's free, and it's not quite as complete as PixInsight. StarNet is a program just for taking the stars out of your images. And so you might be wondering, why would I want to do that? I spent all this time capturing the stars, why would I take them out? Well, you'll see today that it's part of processing. It allows you to bring out things like dim nebulae, and then you can put the stars back in afterwards. Okay, so when I first started, of course, I thought that everyone who pursued astrophotography had the same goal, just to take pictures of the night sky. But once you're in it for a while, you realize that people actually have two slightly different goals. Some people like to capture the smallest possible detail, their resolution lovers, right? They like to have a really big telescope and capture something like the rings of Saturn or little dust flames within a distant galaxy. And so what really excites them about the hobby is seeing the smallest things out there in the night sky. There are other people who are more completists, right? So the programs that Astrophotography puts on, like, those are people that like to capture a list of objects, like the Messier marathons, and that can be really exciting too, right? This person has done the complete Apple planetary nebulae and put that online. What's always excited me the most, though, is seeing something out there that's nearly invisible, right? It's something that we didn't discover just with our eye. We only discover some of these things with cameras because they're that dim. So this is things like the integrated flux nebula, which is a layer of dust that's at high galactic latitude. So if you imagine the Milky Way plane, it's up above and below the Milky Way plane, and it's lit up by all the stars in the Milky Way, not just a single star, right? So it's very, very dim. And so this kind of pursuit has led me to go after difficult objects, right? Objects in the night sky that a lot of people wouldn't pursue just because they take so much time. And by time, I mean literally time. Like you have to spend night after night pointing your telescope at the same thing. And this builds up what we call integration time. But even with lots of integration on some of these objects, if you don't know how to process them, you're never going to really be able to see them clearly like you can here. So it's sort of a two-part challenge. You have to have the patience to maybe spend dozens of hours, out there in the cold, pointing your telescope at the same thing, and then you have to get back onto the computer and spend more time than that, probably 100 hours, trying to figure out how do I actually get this to show up because it's so dim. But that's what's really been exciting about me, about the hobby. I don't know why, but that's just what I always loved about it. But of course, like anyone, when I started, I didn't know what I was doing, but I still sort of have that same mindset of what I was really interested in was bringing out these weird, dim things. So by my standards today, the Witchhead Nebula isn't really dim, but back then I was like, oh, this is really, really difficult. The Witchhead Nebula is this reflection nebula in Orion. And this was an early example of my astrophotography. It was done with just the camera lens on Star Tracker. And I still use that kind of setup today, of course. But the main thing I didn't know was how to process this properly. And so in 2016, the main way that people were saying to bring dim stuff out was to just process normally and then shrink the stars, right? So because a common problem is when you just bring up all the levels in your astrophotograph, everything is bright. So the background gets bright, but also the stars get really bright and fluid. So what we would do was bring up all the levels and then try to shrink the stars. And a problem with that was to shrink the stars, you have to build what's called a mask. So you're basically just saying, I'm selecting all the stars in the image. And in a dense image field, it's really hard to build a proper star mask. So what happens is the stars start joining together and we get this really ugly effect, like little worms throughout your image when you look closely. So I wasn't satisfied, so I kept looking. And I'm a librarian by training, so I really like internet research. Eventually I found this gentleman who's a Finnish astrophotographer named J.P. Metsävio. And he was describing a useful technique on his blog where what he did is he never tried to shrink the stars. What he did was he would process the stars and the background nebulosity separately and then put them back together. And in 2017, the way that he was doing this was just through Photoshop. So Photoshop has a tool called Dust and Scratches that was originally designed for taking dust out of your picture. And you might think, why would there be dust in a picture? Well, early on, we were all taking pictures on film, and when you scanned in a film print, there was often dust on the film print. And so you would then want to take that out of the digital transfer. And so this was the tool, Dust and Scratches filter. But he was using it to remove the stars from his image because stars sort of resemble little spots of dust. And it actually worked pretty well. So it was a cool technique. I was really happy with it and produced some of my first images that I still like to this day. They were done with a 200 millimeter camera lens, but a monochromatic camera. And the advantage of a monochromatic camera is you can use narrowband filters. So it allowed me to shoot from a light-polluted city and capture things that were much dimmer than I thought possible from a light-polluted city, right? These are, this is a supernova remnant, the Spaghetti Nebula, and that is the Flying Bat Squid, which is a very dim nebula pair. Now, technology in astrophotography is always advancing very quickly, as you all know, and so just a year after I found that technique, someone came out with an easier way to do it. It was called StarNet++, and it was an AI-trained, what do they call that, a neural network of images that people had taken. He then took the stars out of hundreds of astrophotography images and trained an artificial intelligence to recognize what are stars so that it could remove them automatically. And this worked a lot better than I could do it manually in Photoshop, and it also was a lot faster, right? Now it's gotten even faster still. They keep advancing this kind of technology. And what I'm pointing out here is that, I don't know if you can see this, but by taking the stars out, I could see things in my pictures that I couldn't see before. And so that's one of the main advantages of removing the stars is once you take that busy star field out, you start seeing things in the background that are interesting. And so in this case, what I saw was this collection of dark nebulae that I dubbed the skeleton hand. And just because that's what I thought it was like. I'm always coming up with these names for what I see in my pictures. I think it's a fun part of the hobby. Actually, then later in that same field, I found another little object that I call the Hummingbird Nebula, which is a little reflection nebula in the same field here that I think no one has ever spotted before. And again, I think the ability to remove the stars to spot things like this, because without it, you just can't see everything that's actually in your picture. Along the way, there's been more releases of these star removal techniques. This is a paid one, Star Exterminator. We also had a new release of the free one, StarNet V2. Okay, and then just to show you sort of what it would look like, this is a field in the constellation Cepheus. And on the left is if we just took the brightness levels and just raised them, right? And so you can see what happens is there's so many stars in the image that when you just raise the brightness levels, it gets overwhelmed with the star field. Now, if we remove the stars from that same image, you can see there's actually a lot of interesting dark nebulae structure behind the star field. But then, if we take the stars out and we recombine them, and we can stretch, just sort of change the brightness levels of the stars and the nebulae separately, we can get a very pleasing image like the one on the right, where the star of the photo is what you want to show, and in my case, what I want to show is those dark nebulae. Okay, so I'm going to show a program now called Siril, S-I-R-I-L, and show you exactly this process of taking out the stars and recombining the stars. And just this year, a couple months ago, Siril made this whole process really easy. Before, I was always doing it with like a command line and then bringing the photo back in and using pixel math or Photoshop layers, and I think it was a little bit cumbersome. What I really like about this free program is how easy they've made it to see what you're doing, both with raising the brightness of the star layer, and raising the brightness of the nebula. So I'm sure many of you are unfamiliar with Zero. I'm not going to have time to go into like an advanced tutorial showing all the ins and outs today, as this is also isn't really a workshop, so I see most people aren't on laptops, so I don't expect you to really learn it right now. But like I said at the beginning, this whole slide deck, as well as my practice file, are at that link. So what you can do is when you get home, the rest of this slide deck is the step-by-step that I'm about to show. So you can go through this and practice it yourself. Okay, and I'm going to sit down and switch over to Cyril here. Okay. Sorry, just getting it set up. There we go. Okay, so this is the latest version of the program. It's called Zero 1.2.0 beta. And when you open it up, it'll look like this. I have a video on my YouTube channel about how to get the StarNet removal program working with Zero. It's pretty easy on Windows. It's a little bit harder on Mac, but the gist of it is you just need to download StarNet and then tell Zero where StarNet is on your computer. So it's under Preferences Miscellaneous. So I've already done that. So I can go ahead and open my image. Okay, and when you open an image in Zero, it looks mostly black. That's because the display mode right now is called linear. And so I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but linear data means that all of the data is scrunched up over on the left-hand side, basically in the shadows. And then active stretching is taking that data and applying a transformation to it so that you're bringing out the parts of the image that you want while controlling other parts. So we're going to go through stretching, but good Astro programs have ability to apply an auto stretch so that you can see what you're doing and work on the linear data. And so Cyril has this, and it has a bunch of different options for how to auto stretch the data. So the obvious one is just auto stretch. But one that I really like when working on the data right away, at first, is the histogram stretch. And you might think, why would Nico like that better? It just makes the picture uglier. Well, it really shows me the light pollution gradient, and I can see a little bit more of the background nebulosity because it's stretched it even more than the auto stretch, right? And what I like even better is I can turn on this histogram stretch and then also invert it. And now I can see some of that background nebulosity even a little bit better. And the reason that's important is because the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to remove that light pollution gradient. You can see how at the bottom of the picture it's a lot brighter than at the top. And this is very normal in astrophotography. Even when you're shooting from a dark sky location like we are here, you'll often see that the bottom of your picture towards the horizon is a lot brighter because of city light pollution. So often the first step in astrophotography processing is trying to remove that gradient. So I'm going to do that here with image processing. And now I have to find it, background extraction. And if you've played around with PixInsight, this is very similar to dynamic background extraction, DBE. It's just Cyril's free version of that, basically. For this image, I'm going to choose polynomial for the interpolation method, and I'm going to turn the degree order down to 2. Now, there's a lot of things in astrophotography processing where people just do things like that, and then you're like, why did they do that? And the truth is, for me, it's always just trial and error. I try things out before I present them, and then this is what works, basically, right? But To try to describe it a little bit, degree order is how much it's going to try to fit a model, basically. So if you think of a simple gradient, if you turn down the degree order, it assumes a simpler gradient. Well, if you turn up the degree order, it assumes that there's a lot more going on. So looking at my image, I can see that was a very simple light pollution gradient, where the bottom was bright and the top was dark. And so I can turn down the degree order and get a better result with this. Okay, the next thing that we do is you can generate samples to say this is where the background is, but on a picture like this, that's not going to work well, right? Because there are little nebula structures throughout. There's also a lot of bright stars. So I'm going to instead place samples where I think they should go. And where they should go is where it's just the sky. So I'm just going to start placing samples here. And the goal is to place them as evenly as you can in all parts of the picture. So we want at least one in the middle, we want some on the edges, and we want some in each corner. Since this is a live demo, I'm not going to belabor this. Okay, when I'm ready, and I've placed at least about, 8 samples, I can click Compute Background. And it will show me a result. Now, this result is inverted, so I can always click this little button down here to see what it did. But it did a pretty good job of removing that light pollution gradient, right? Because if you remember before, it was so much brighter at the bottom. What I do like, though, about Cyril is if I wasn't happy with this result, if I decided, oh, you know what, that sample right there is actually on some nebulosity, I could just right-click it to delete it and place a new sample somewhere else. Try to do this. I'm on a trackpad, so I don't know if it's going to work. I placed another one. There we go. I deleted it completely, and now I can put another one somewhere better and just compute the background again. And you can keep doing this to try to iterate and try to get a better and better result before you actually apply the background extraction. Okay, but since this is just a quick demo, I'm just going to not spend a lot of time on that, but normally that's part of the process in processing that I would spend a lot of time on, maybe up to half an hour or something, just sort of playing around with the samples and trying to get the best result. That you might do at this point is if your image had a lot of green noise. This was shot with a normal DSLR camera, and often with a DSLR camera, we see a lot of green noise in our images. So there is a remove green noise tool, and it's as simple as just hitting apply and seeing what it does. So you can do this process, that remove green noise, at this stage, or we can also do it later, or both. Sometimes I do it at both parts. But now I want to show you the star of the show here, which is removing the stars. So this is under star processing, and it's StarNet star removal. And the important thing here, when you open this up, it's again under processing, StarNet, star removal, is that you turn on these first 3 checkboxes if you're working with linear data like I am here. This pre-stretches it so that it can actually work. And then this recompose stars on completion is this really cool process I'm going to show you where we can stretch the stars only and the nebula only separately. Okay, so let's go ahead and execute it. It'll just take a few seconds. Okay, and you can see that the image looks pretty much the same. That's because it's still histogram stretch. The first thing that I'm going to do is find an area of the image where there's not much nebulosity, and I'm going to draw a little box. And just like this, I'm just going to click and drag on the image. And by drawing this little box, it's saying that's a part of the sky that is basically just empty sky. And this process uses a kind of stretching called generalized hyperbolic stretch. It's not super important, but if you want to use a different kind of stretch, that's an option. But this one is quite good. It's just that it's a little bit complicated. You have to first tell it where the symmetry point under image is. And so to do that, I'm just going to make that box and then click the eyedropper. And for this first stretch, I like to use just, again, a part of empty sky for that symmetry point. And then I'm going to go back down here and switch it to linear so we can actually see the stretch happening as we're doing it. I'm going to turn up the stretch intensity. For this first stretch, we want a really aggressive stretch because we're bringing things out from the darkest shadows, so we want to bring them up. You can see that all of our data is in this little blue line here, all the way on the left-hand side. So we need a very high stretch intensity. And then I can just start using this stretch factor to bring it over. And you can see as I'm doing this, we get a live preview of what I'm doing right over here. Now, you might be tempted to just take this thing and bring it way over right away. Now, the problem with that, as you might be able to see here, is it really flattens out your picture, right? It's taking this sample right here and assuming you want to stretch the entire picture based on that point. But I don't actually want to do that. I just want to use that point for my initial stretch. So I'm just going to do something like this. I know that it's not super visible on screen. And I'm going to do this iteratively, the stretching process. I'm going to do this first stretch. I'm going to go ahead and apply it. You can now see the data over here. I'm going to actually move it a little bit left so we can start over here in the shadows. I'm going to do that by just raising the black point. Okay, apply that. And now we should be able to do a really nice stretch of the data. So I'm going to apply the symmetry point again. And just like that. So what I'm doing here is that first stretch was just to get the data out. Now with this second stretch, we can really just sort of play around with these sliders until we like what we're seeing by eye. So I find often with that first stretch, I turn the local stretch intensity up to something like 10 or 11. With this second stretch, it only has to be at something like 3 or 4. And we get a very nice result here with the nebula. Okay, and so this is still starless, as you can see. To bring the stars in, all we have to do is take this one, this slider right here for the stars, called stretch factor, and bring it over, and the stars come into our preference. So if you bring it over a little bit less, you get more muted stars. If you bring it more over to the right, you get a much heavier effect. You get a lot more stars in the field. So this is really just a personal preference thing. I'm going to do something like that. And then I might decide, you know what, after I've stretched the stars, I think actually the nebulae could be a little bit brighter. So I can go back to this slider and continue working on the nebulae. And so for anyone who's like, well, what's the big deal with this? The big deal is before, it was very hard to have, to be able to stretch the stars and the nebula and see everything in one preview like this. So that is what's revolutionary about what Cyril did here, is that you can be stretching these two things and go back and forth and see a live preview, and then when you're happy, and only when you're happy with your results, you can apply those changes. So that's what's really cool about what they've done here. Now you can see after stretching, I am seeing some green noise down here. So remember, we can apply that remove green noise at any point. I'm going to do it here. And I like that result a lot better. I feel that that's a more sort of neutral color palette for this dust and sepia. For identifying the objects, if anyone's unclear of what we're looking at, right there is the Iris Nebula, and right here is the Dark Shark Nebula, right? So this is an 85 millimeter camera lens, just to give you some context here. So it's a really wide field of a giant molecular cloud in the constellation Cepheus. This is the kind of stuff I love doing. All right, let's show you at least one more here. I'll show you a weird one that not many people shoot. This is called the Eridanus loop. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the Barnard's loop in Orion. This is right next to it, and it's actually part of a giant structure called a superbubble, where at one point these were more sort of together, and then as time has passed, they've gotten further apart. But that red loop is a companion, basically, of Barnard's loop, but it's much fainter. And then the other cool thing going on in this image is the Taurus molecular cloud is sort of overlapping with it. Okay, so I'm going to skip over background extraction here, and we'll just go straight on to star processing, just because I know that's the most complicated thing that I'm showing today. So again, we turn on these three checkboxes, click execute. After it's run StarNet, it's going to bring up this window called Star Recomposition. And what's going on here again is that the right side is the stars only, the left side is the nebulae or the background only. And so we can manipulate the two separately. To do so, though, we have to use different kinds of stretches, right? So if on this left side, it's the generalized hyperbolic stretch. On the right side for the stars, it should be the modified arcsine stretch. So to use the generalized hyperbolic stretch, you start by defining an area of the image that's just empty, just sky. Mark it as a symmetry point. Turn your local stretch intensity up to something like 10 or 11. And then raise the stretch factor until this little histogram, you can start seeing that little spike come out right here. And in terms of how far to bring it out, I usually like to bring it out to this first line about. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And then I'm going to take the flat point and just move it back over to the left a little bit. Apply that. Okay, then I'm going to set the symmetry point again. Now, with some images, you might want to change where your symmetry point is. So if you're really wanting to work on the dust, you might make a sample of the dust and set that as your symmetry point. For the second one, though, we don't think the local stretch intensity is high. Something like 3 is usually good. And then I'm just going to take the stretch factor and start bringing it over until I like what I've seen with the nebula. Okay, and then in terms of the stars, you just want to make sure it's on this modified arcsine, and then just take the stretch factor and bring that over until the stars are in the image how you like them, how you like to see them, basically. So some people are going to prefer a more true busy star field like that, and some people would like the stars to just barely be there, and the star to show really to be the background nebulosity. I like something sort of in between, right? So I like to see that there's lots of stars in the image, but I still would like the background and velocity to really shine. When you're happy with your results and you can go back and forth between these two, you just apply them with this blue apply button here. And then in this case, I'm actually pretty happy with the image, just like that. So I did not do anything else to it, but there are a full suite of other options here. So you can try image sharpening, you can try color saturation, all kinds of things. So for instance, if I wanted to try to make the reds and magentas in the image more saturated, I could pick magenta pink here and raise the saturation level and apply that. And so it has a full suite of little processes you can do. They're all just listed under this image processing menu. Question I often get about Serial is, does it work with other programs I'm used to? And yes, you can save this image in all kinds of different formats. So the common one for astronomy software is FITS, or FIT. This stands for Flexible Image Transport System. But if you save it as a fixed file, then you could bring it to PixInsight or any other program you're used to that's astronomy related. If you wanted to bring it into Adobe Photoshop or GIMP, which is a free Photoshop clone, I would suggest TIFF. And then if you just want to save this and share it on Facebook or the web, you can save it as a JPEG. All right. Guess I have a few minutes. I'll show one more quickly. This is the integrated flex nebula around Polaris. So when you look at the North Star, of course, you don't see any of this. It's only through images that we can see that there's actually all of this dust right around our pole star. And you can see that this image is very noisy, right? There's a lot of chromatic noise. That's because I took this, in the summer, like we are right now, with just a normal DSLR, and I think it's only about an hour of integration. But another thing that I like about this method is that I find that you have a lot of control over how much that noise appears just by how you're stretching the image, how aggressively you stretch. And at least for me, I find that I have a lot more control when I'm working in this way with the starless image and the stars image separate. Okay, so to show the process one more time, I'm going to make a box. I'm going to switch the display mode to linear. I'm going to set the symmetry point with that box that I put right there. I'm going to bring up the stretch intensity, then bring up the stretch factor, apply it. I'm then going to reset the black point, apply that. And then I often like to move this box to an area of dust or the nebula. I'm going to move it over there. Again, set the symmetry point, bring up the stretch intensity to something like 3. And then this is what I'm talking about with the noise. Right here, the stretch factor, this is where you can really, so if I do something like that, you can see I'm seeing a lot more of the nebulosity, but I'm also seeing a lot more of the noise. So this is where you sort of have to have judgment about how much you can actually stretch the data. And I find that by using these two sliders, the stretch intensity and the stretch factor, I actually have a lot of control over that. You'll also find that when you bring back in the stars, a star field itself will hide a lot of noise because it just makes the image a lot more visually interesting. You you can't really often discern with a wide image like this what exactly is a pixel of noise and what is a pixel of a star. Okay, so I might do something like that, and then just apply that remove green noise. And then while we're on the topic of noise, let me just say that Cyril doesn't have many noise reduction processes yet. So that's basically it. You can control some of how much the noise appears through stretching, and then it has that remove green noise option. PixInsight has many more ways to handle noise in your images. So it's not fully here yet, but I think that just what I showed is pretty impressive for free software. Okay, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Sure. So the question was, instead of working on one image at a time, how do you work on a sequence of images? So it's just about how you start. So instead of starting with the open command up here in the upper left, I would start by first creating a sequence with this tab right here. So if your images are not already FITS files, you can first convert them. So if they're DSLR raw files or something like that, you can convert them with this tab, and then just tell it this folder of images is my sequence, and then you can, if they're not already registered and all that, you can go through this process of registering and stacking them, or through these tabs, there's a lot of options for applying certain processes to the full sequence of images. So Cyril also allows you to do that background extraction on each image before it stacks them, and other things like that. It's all through these tabs right here. Now, if you're lazy like me and you just want to do something pretty simple, like just take a bunch of images and register and stack them, it also has scripts. So instead of going through tab by tab, you can just point the script at a bunch of folders, and it will go through those folders and do all of this work for you. So I have videos about how to use these scripts on YouTube. Yeah. Yeah, the question is, when you normally stack all your photos before doing this post-processing? Yes. Now, Cyril has some processes you can do on the individual photos during the stacking process. So it's a little bit unique in that regard, in that if you want to, you can try removing the background from each image before it stacks, or you can do it after. I'm lazy, so I usually just do it after. So I stack all my images and then I do the processes. But there are options for applying certain processes to each image if you want to do it that way. There's also some interesting options in here for doing comment processing and other things where it does help to look at your individual images before you stack them, right? Because if you're thinking of a comment, it's moving through the star fields, it's moving at a different rate. Yeah.
You do Polaris and try to get the great flux nebula. Is there at all try to avoid walking noise, or do you find that Polaris can track the
So the question is, with shooting Polaris, do I dither? And dither means just slightly moving your frame in between the exposures. In this case, I didn't dither because I was on a Star Adventurer tracker without guide. So the only way I could have dithered is if I did it manually, which I was too lazy to do. But I think It is an option. I know that some people have trouble with auto guiding when they're pointed right at Polaris. One technique I've heard can work is if you just, using a guide scope, slightly turn your guide scope about 10 degrees off of the pole. So it's guiding actually a little bit off of the image, but it can actually work pretty well. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Pleasure to meet you.
I gotta get that. Please like and subscribe. Follow.
Hey, folks, I know we're a little bit early, so let's take about a 10-minute break here. Get rid of the restroom. I'll be brief to do that. And, join us back in about 10 minutes, and we'll kick off with, print information. And to start with is the basic setup for capturing data with the DSLR. Thank you much. There's snacks in the back, especially for those who weren't here yesterday. We have a coffee machine in the back. And if you need a restroom during the conference, feel free to go anytime. Go outside the main doors here, take a left, take another left, and the restroom's right here.
It's me.
Thank you.
What? Oh, I'm so sorry. Forgive me. You want the keys? Make sure you download maps so you don't get lost. You know how to download maps? Oh no, I think I'll just leave it running because it's running. Ay, 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 ay. How far will you go? Downloading 40 megabytes. 27%. Oh, what's
this? Oh, what do you mean? What's this mean? Um,
I'm sure that.
I would not.
I couldn't get my to run. I don't know.
It worked for me.
Yeah, he usually does.
Let's do a festival weekend, which I don't know if you ever got it. I put up the lectures on YouTube.
Yeah, I did.
Is it okay to change the license? I put it as a copyright. Would it be okay if I put it for Creative Commons? So I can use it on the media and all the- That's a big license. All right. There's a Creative Commons.
Oh, yeah.
I just think that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so there's that. If you want, I can put on a CD or DVD. If you want me to do that?
No, it's okay.
Okay, but the audio is really good quality. The video, not so much, as audio is good. They have a separate recorder for the audio. Yeah. You mind if I record you today too?
That's fine.
All right, cool.
Hey, folks, welcome back. At this time, we'll go ahead and have Brent get started. Brent will be kind of double duty here again, just as a reminder, he'll have his DSLR setup, seminar, and then right after that, we'll go right into the solar eclipse. So, everybody give a hand to Brent Maynard, and at this point,
Hands up. I'll speak loud, so if you can't hear me, say you can't hear me, and I'll try to speak loud. I'm gonna use my hands a lot, so I'm gonna around the mic. So, first, let's get just started with the little bit of introductions here. Somebody turn out the lights back there. Thanks again. My name is Brent Maynard. If you ever have any questions about anything, please feel free to send me an email at brent.maynard@marshall.edu. So I'll do my best to answer the questions. I do appreciate Nico's discussion earlier. I have been using a tool called Astrophotography Processor, which is, I like it. It's a little easier than Fix Insight, but I was always used Deep Sky Stacker. I was always about the free tools, and it's just recently that I've actually run across Serial. I don't know how it flew under the radar, but I'm going to start playing with Serial and start running some data through it, see how it does. I like some of the capabilities that it has. That things like Photoshop challenge to get the equivalent results in Photoshop. Before we actually jump into the discussion here, I do want to show, give you an idea. I'm going to show you my setup and the equipment that I use, but we'll just look at some of the basic images. Now, about 90% or 95% of the time that I'm taking images, I'm using DSLR, of course, and lenses. I rarely use a telescope unless I put on my big C8 and I'm going after galaxies or doing planetary imaging or small targets. But typically, I'm doing generally wide field with lenses. And I'll talk about the different lenses that I have. So we'll just kind of shoot through some of the images. These are all fairly recent over the past couple of years, and of course, really wide. This is a Dolly Sods, which is
That way.
and it's about 45, 50-minute drive from here, but it's a remote plateau area. It's about 4,000, 4,100 feet. And at night, of course, it's got really nice dark skies. That's a single exposure, 60-second exposure. Green Bank. If you ever get a chance to go to Green Bank, please go to Green Bank. It's a great facility we have here in the state. Everybody likes the horse head and the plane. This was a relatively quick, and the dynamic range between what you can see on a computer screen versus a projector, they're different, so it's a lot harder. Yes.
How did you get a digital photo of everything? The digital camera?
They let us do it that particular night. They had it in maintenance mode, and they weren't doing any other ancillary data capture, and so they actually, we were down there with Green Bank people,
Okay.
so they let us do that.
So normally you have to use film, right?
Hmm?
Normally you would have to.
Normally you have to use film. This was just a quick 4-panel image. I had just a tripod, camera on tripod. That set up almost different cameras, same lens, and take a picture, like a 25-second image, filled it up, take a 25-second image, filled it up. I did that 4 times, and then used software. And in this particular case, I used Lightroom to create mosaic, and it stitched that all together. And I just did some post-processing. That's just a 4-panel tripod image. That was down in the Main Valley. Of course, planetary, we're really going to talk about planetary, but that was done with the Canon RP video. More wide field, that's the large Maginelli cloud. A lot of your questions. This is a C8. So just to give you a scale, this is the Lagoon Nebula taken with the C8 with the focal reducer. So this is around 1,200 millimeter focal length for this particular image. And if you saw the real image, it's really vignette bad because of the focal reducer. And I just want what's in the center anyway. We go back to this image, that's the Lagoon Nebula. This is taken with a 180 millimeter telephoto lens. So you can see the difference in scale between a telephoto lens versus a C8. Nico is also talking about star reduction. This is M31 that I processed and ran through StarNet++. And reducing the stars really, what he says is true, really makes the target that you're interested in kind of pop out, not be inundated with all the stars, kind of just overwhelming what's in there. So doing some star reduction definitely helps pull out some of that detail and let you focus on your target without being overwhelmed with a whole bunch of stars. And all these galaxies, except for M31, are taken with the C8. I did get lucky on even though it was a smoky night, having trouble shooting through all the smoke. The supernova in M101 was definitely bright, and talk about magnitude. You have the apparent magnitude and how bright the galaxy is. M101 is a big galaxy. That's its apparent magnitude is pretty bright, but it's also fairly hard to image because it's so spread out. But the supernova there definitely was outshining the black core of M101, so it's definitely bright. Probably one of my favorite targets, of course, tonight is the North American Nebula. It's right here, it's right overhead. It's an easy target. If just getting started with astrophotography. The North American is a nice, easy target. It's always high in the sky this time of year. It's bright, it's easy to find, and there's a lot of good data. And of course, in the wintertime, you can get Orion. And Orion is a nice one. It's a little challenging. It tends to blow out the core around the trapezium, so you have to kind of layer the exposures in so you don't completely blow out the core. And this is a work in progress. I haven't been able to go back to it yet. This is the Rho Ophiuchus region, going into the Prancing Pony, into the Sagittarius region of the black, the Milky Way, center of the Milky Way. This was taken at the Spruce Knob back during the pandemic. That's 1 hour on each panel of data, so 32-minute exposures on each one of those. So I want to continue that mosaic over time. That's with the 85 millimeter. 85 millimeter signal and the NRP. So let's just go ahead and jump into the presentation here. And please ask questions at any point in time. I'll look around, so just raise your hand and let me know. So I've got all my gear up here. This is what I had out on the field last night that I was using. Threw it in the back of the car about 1:30 this morning, and emptied it out. Pulled in this morning. I'm not going to set my car apart. I forgot that part. We're good. I'm just right up. Yeah, I think it's still. I'll check. So, of course, we want something that's a nice straight tripod. My mount is a Orion Sirius mount, so it's a fairly hefty mount. It's not a travel mount by any means. It's quite heavy. You have the counterweights on here. You have plus the scope, you're still in 40 pounds of mass. But I still use the camera lenses, and it does a good job. Because it can handle that problem. The other thing is, don't forget your weights. I've forgotten my weights before. So how do you deal with that? You use duct tape, masking tape, whatever kind of tape you can find, bungee cords or rubber bands, and you take water bottles and you fasten to your counter. I've had to do that. Don't forget your weights. If you do, you can be creative and tie water bottles or whatever counterbalance weight that you need. Batteries and chargers. If you last night I imaged with a battery in the camera. I typically I'm going to be going all night long. I'll use a battery adapter for my camera, so I don't have to worry about switching out batteries throughout the night. These things are handy. You can get these on Amazon. Relatively inexpensive. Put your camera model in there, and it'll you could probably have a dozen different options or varieties of these cables, and typically a USB plug on the end that you can plug into your camera and run off of a larger battery tank. That way you don't have to worry about batteries. This is the battery pack that I used last night. This is the Jackery. Terry was talking about she uses the 300. This is the 240. And I ran for about, I don't know, like 3 hours last night. I was running the mount. I was running the guide camera and the ASI Air Plus. So everything was running off this one battery pack, and it is at 85%. So, for I can go all night without any trouble with this particular battery tank. So that is, of course, make sure you keep it charged and have charging adapter ports as well. There will be someplace multiple nights. Memory cards, always keep spares. You never know when memory cards are going to go south, get corrupted. You always want to have a spare or two in your bag in case you need to switch over one. If you need any adapter tubes for lenses or adapter rings, and I'll talk about that here in just a minute, the lenses that I use. And make sure you get all your cables. I forgot a cable, and I thought for sure I wasn't going to be able to shoot last night, but I actually, by chance, found a cable to run my, to power my mount off of the ASI Air Plus. I usually just have a separate cable. I forgot. I use hand warmers for dew mitigation. So I don't like having too much power in the field. I don't run laptops in the field. I don't want to have heater straps that have a whole bunch of power consumption. So what I typically do is still on here. As you can see, this is from this is from last night. I've got a hand warmer just bungee corded with it's an air tie on there. But I only have one, so about 1 o'clock I started doing over. I usually put 2 hand warmers on the lens. If it's a really bad night, I'll put 3. And they'll go, if the three dog nights, 3 hand warmers. But those typically work quite well for me. I do the same thing with my CA. I'll just put 3 or 4 hand warmers around the corrector plate on my CA. Do all, unless it's a really bad day. And then if it's that bad, it's just everything's just dripping wet. It's all the time to give up. Bring a toolbox, just whatever, but you just never know what you might need. Especially going someplace remote, and it's an hour and a half or 2 hours to Walmart or wherever. So you always take a toolbox with just stuff in it. You never know what you might need. Talking about earlier, it has adapter tubes. I use Canon cameras, but a lot of my lenses are old Nikon lenses. This is a 300 millimeter Nikon lens, but you can mount it to the Canon bodies using an adapter ring. And so I've got the 300. I also have the 180 millimeter f2.8. This is a great lens for astrophotography. You have one. Some of the images I was showing earlier, the wide field, lagoon, and Trifid Nebula, getting into the center of black center of our Milky Way and star cloud. This is a great lens to pick that kind of stuff up. The Orion Nebula, the Forset image I showed earlier was with the 180 millimeter telephoto. Another one that I don't use quite as much anymore, but I've used it a lot in the past, is just a wide field. This is a Tokina, 11 to 16 millimeters, so you get really nice wide field images with this. This is really designed for the crop sensors, either Nikon or Canon or whatever crop sensor you might use. All these old lenses are really meant for full frame, but you can use them on crop sensors, so that they're designed for full frame. But this doesn't work that great on a full frame camera. My main shooting camera now is a Canon RP that I modified. I took one of the filters out to make it sensitive to the hydrogen alpha. So you can use this, but it's really not designed for full frame sensor. So I use whatever a good lens is. It could be a Nikon lens, it could be a Tokina or a Canon lens, or more recently, the lens I have on our here right now is a Sigma part that's 85 millimeter, a 1.4, so it's a very fast lens. This is a great lens. That's what one panel I showed you earlier with the row of cookies going into the Milky Way. That was done with that lens. And the other thing I did last night was I did a time lapse. This is the Canon T5i with a 24 millimeter lens on it, full frame, so it's pulling out of wide. It's wide build fluid. This is limited for full frame. Essentially, this is the box and the camera. So it works fine. So I just set this up and started shooting 20-second photos. I did that for like 2 hours. I haven't even really looked at the data on this yet to see how the time lapse of the Milky Way down at the nature center through the trees. I'm hoping that turns out well. If I get a chance to sit around on processes and to put time lapse, you can look at it later. But this is a great way to get started as well. Tripod, camera, and just shoot wide field Milky Way. And you can take single images, you can do a panel shot, a 4-panel shot. Just taking, you take your take an image here, go back a little bit, take another image, go back, take another image, take another image. Before those, takes maybe a minute and a half, so you're not getting really any movement much on the Milky Way. And then let the software stitch it all together for you in the final nice big mosaic of the Milky Way. Any questions so far? Yes. I use Lightroom to stitch them together. It has an auto, it's like it's Photoshop, but Lightroom, you can incorporate full images into the full thing down there, so it's pretty much it. So, one thing that's important with doing imaging is to get good mount alignment, both make sure it's level, balanced, and polar aligned. The balancing your mount, you don't want it to be perfect. If you have a perfectly balanced mount and your gears are moving, you can get into this situation where it starts clogging back and forth if you have any backlash in your gears. You really want to put some strain on one side or the other. I'm probably saying this wrong, but I think if you leave it on the east side, where you're heavy on the east side, that's pulling your right section gear is pulling the scope over, rather than if it's balanced perfectly, it's not going back and forth and kind of jogging it along, right? Pulling it in a constant tension. So you want it to be close to balance, but not perfect balance. It can cause issues. Your gears aren't meshed perfectly, kind of clog back and forth, and you get caught with these stars. Polar alignment through a polar scope. So if you have a polar scope, I do that for rough polar alignment. I'll talk about how I do good polar alignment. And use an app like PS Align. It's an app you can download, and if you launch the app, it shows you where at this moment in time, at your current location, where Polaris needs to be in your polar scope. So right now it's at the hour angle is 5 hours and 12 minutes. So it's just a little bit after 5 o'clock. Think of that as a clock. So it's like 5:12. And so you can get Polaris into that little location according to the app. Then you're really close to being polar aligned. And that implies that your polar scope is aligned with your optical train, your axis. Sometimes they get knocked around, but I just try to get it close. And then I think there's going to be some discussions on the ASI Air. I use ASI Air Plus, which is what I have here. This controls my mount. This controls image taking, this does my auto guiding. But one of the greatest functions, which I think is worth the price of this thing, even the original ASI Air, is polar alignment. It's polar alignment. Last night I was done in 3 minutes. The time I started till the time it says you have good polar alignment, 3 minutes. If you're going to do drift alignment and all that kind of stuff, you'd be sitting there for half an hour, 45 minutes, just trying to do drift alignment. This thing's worth its weight in gold just for that and plate solve. Just those 2 functions. Everything else is nice. It's a nice tool for astrophotography. If you're using Go-To-Out, do Starline. If you're using ASI Air, it's not necessary. Just do a plate solve and it figures out where it is. You can just point it up into the sky if you're still balanced or whatever. You just generally point it someplace and have a plate solve and it figures out where it is. Talked about dew prevention already. Just be prepared, especially this time of year around here. We get a lot of humidity. It falls out at nighttime. It cools down. Focusing, continue to focus throughout the evening. You might have great focus when you first get started, then everything starts cooling down. So your lens cools down, changes geometry, shrinks a little bit, things happen, so you need to refocus a couple of different times. So the other thing that I have to be careful of, especially with this guy, there's a lot of glass in the front of this lens. So if you're pointing up this way, it has a nice, nice high quality engineered helical focuser. And if it's pointing up over time, it'll want to actually push that focuser down. So you need to fasten that focuser something. Either put a rubber band around it to keep tension on the camera body or the optical tube of the lens, or get a piece of tape, gaffer's tape or painter's tape. Don't use them. Just a piece of tape, and you can see I actually still have some painter's tape. And just put a piece of tape to lock the focus in, so that if it's pointing up, it won't defocus over time based on the way the lens is. And of course, focus. Achieving spot on focus. It's just a grid basically. You put over the lens, it takes pictures and creates some diffraction spikes to allow you to get perfect focus on the stall. Don't have that enough maps. They're easy to get. You can make them yourself. I used to, before they were readily available, I could get a piece of glossy photo paper, print out a bent-off mask on an inkjet printer, and then take a X-Acto knife and cut out the little grids, and be surprised how well that works. And even if it gets, because it's glossy photo paper, it'll hold up to even moisture or dew. So I used to do that all the time, just make my own cut out of photo paper. Setting up your camera, always check your memory card. I've run out of memory without realizing it on my card. Always shoot in RAW mode. Do not shoot in JPEG. If you're getting started with this, one of the options by default, DSLR can be set to JPEG. Set it to RAW, always shoot in RAW. Because you don't want the camera pressing your data into a JPEG format, stowing away data. And as Nico showed in his talk, a lot of that data we can't see. You take a picture, you take a 2-minute exposure, you take a 5-minute exposure on a camera, and it looks like you don't have anything. But you start pulling, stretching that data, there's data in there. You don't want the camera pressing that data away, because it will just toss that data and not have it available for you to process and stretch. Always shoot in RAW mode. The ball mode snafu. I've done this before. Getting ready for I'm going to take images. I'm going to take 2-minute exposures, but I'm going to take a test image, make sure everything's lined up okay. So I'll put my camera down to like a 25-second exposure. I'll take a 25-second exposure. Everything looks good. I'm ready, and I'll start the process of capturing data. Forgetting to put it back in the bulb mode. So the ASI Air thinking it's going to be taking 2-minute exposures, but the camera's set for 25 seconds. So come out 2 hours later and realize I was taking 2 hours for 25-second exposures instead of taking 2 hours for 2 minutes. That's happened to me more than once. So always make sure when you're getting in there, finally, using bulb mode. If you don't have a tool like the ASI Air, then you'll need something like an intervalometer. Does everybody know what an intervalometer is? Anybody not know what an intervalometer is? So you can, you know what an intervalometer is? So this is an intervalometer, and it lets you, most cameras have the ability to plug in an intervalometer, and then on this you can set up your camera in bulb mode, and then here you say, I want to take 1-minute exposures, I want to take 90-second exposures, I want to take 3-minute exposures, how many exposures I want to take. You press start, and it controls the show. It's like the old plunger eye. Yeah, that mechanical intervalometer, you have to push it down and screw it down and walk away and come back and do it later. This one's electronic, so you can use these as well to take a series of images, long exposure. These are like $19, $20 on Amazon. Just pick one for your camera. I think they're all basically the same now, but some of them have different ones. It's refocus, of course, do that throughout the evening. If it's really cold outside, check your batteries. Yes.
While we were on that subject, I've been doing this for a while. One thing I've never gotten satisfaction is what kind of interval means exposure. What did you got cooling sensors?
Back in the day, people said, put like a 15-second wait, let your sensor cool down a little bit before you start your next image. With the new sensors, it's not necessary. It's immediate. As soon as the image is done, I go right into the next image. I don't worry about the sensor cool down. Now, if you have an older CCD or an older camera, that might be beneficial to let it cool down just a little bit. Which one? The ADD? That's going to be low noise. I wouldn't worry about that. That's fine. I wouldn't worry about letting it cool down. Yes.
What about shutter shot? Don't you have to wait 2 seconds for shutter shot?
Depends on your mount. I never worry about doing the camera, the mirror lockup. Wait a couple seconds.
Lots of mirror slap. You can lock up the mirror for the shutter shot. But all cameras have a shutter. Just like on my camera, you have to wait like 2 seconds for the vibration.
I don't have to worry about with this particular mount, even with the mirror lockup. It doesn't cause any vibrations that are noticeable on mine. But some mounts you might have that, especially if you have a fork-mounted C8 with a fork. Those forks are sometimes like tuning forks. They'll sit there and vibrate for a while. But yeah, you can do that if you need to have that delay. Now the RP is mirrorless. So it doesn't have to worry about the mirror, but you can also turn that off to where it doesn't even use the shutter. It just uses the electronic shutter.
Okay, so you don't have shutter shot.
With the mirrorless cameras, some of them they don't use the shutter at all. Because it's using an electronic shutter.
Okay. I didn't know you could do that.
Well, some cameras, but not all.
Okay. The R50, that's the APS-C.
The RP?
No, the new APS-C, the RFS.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to get
Uh,
I'd have to ask Ken.
yeah, I don't know.
I didn't know, yeah, there was a job asking to use electronic shutter. That's the question.
Yeah, I think in my menu settings on the Canon RP, it says electronic shutter.
Okay, I can look at it.
And you can hear it at night. It doesn't do anything. Yes. Some cameras, not all Nikons, some cameras have an intervalometer built in. A Canon is way behind Nikon in that area. There's not a built-in intervalometer, except on the Canon RP you can do up to 30-second exposure with an intervalometer. Why they won't do a bulk mode intervalometer? They could turn that on in a heartbeat, they won't do it. I don't know why. So that's why I control this. Now, it's a different topic, different subject, but on my Canon T5i, I'm running a piece of augmented, it's not augmented program, it's a program that you load after the camera boots called Magic Lantern. And Magic Lantern allows you to open up a whole bunch of functionality that Canon keeps hidden. They don't expose to the consumer. And one of those features is let you do intervalometer through the camera directly. So that's how I was doing my time lapse last night. So I was using Magic Lantern, and I told it to take a 20-second exposure, just keep doing it. I didn't have to worry about it.
You said that most of the intervalometers are the same, but a lot of them only do 1 second intervals. And so you want one that does 0.1 second, but this one does 0.1 second. So if your maximum exposure time is 3.9 seconds, you can only set at 1 second intervals, you're losing 0.9 seconds per exposure, and that adds up.
Yeah. And
On Tasman,
if you have too long of a gap, you can actually try and do star trails.
But on Tasman, it's more important. You have very limited exposure times. You want the 0.1 second.
Yeah.
intervals.
I've talked about the camera power alternatives already, powering it off a battery tank, so I have to worry about changing batteries overnight. If you are using batteries and it's cold outside and you're outside with your equipment, keep your batteries in your pocket. Try to keep them warm as possible. Top image at 0 degrees. With 0 degrees outside, imaging, and it really kills the batteries. The cold does. So try to keep your batteries warm, so when you put them in, they at least have an advantage instead of just sitting out someplace and getting cold. I'm sure Terry can talk about it. She does a lot of aurora imaging up in Alaska, so she can probably has lots of stories about that. Keeping them back up a little bit. I typically do, as I mentioned, I typically do not wide field imaging. Like probably 90% of the time, I'm using a lens to do something. If I want to do planetary or go after deep, I want to go deep into a galaxy world, then I'll pull out the C8, the big guy. But that's a beast. Don't start, if you've not done astrophotography before, don't try to do astrophotography with the C8. I saw see something here earlier. It's just overwhelming. It can be overwhelming because it's challenging to get the whole setup and everything balanced, and now you're dealing with a really long focal length. It's hard to find target potentially. And start with a lens. That's what I mainly do. I use lenses. And the wider you start, the easier it is. And then you can start getting narrower and narrower, a little bit deeper, shorter field of view over time. Don't try to start with C8 or C10 or C11 or meat equivalent or something with a long focal length. You'll get frustrated pretty quick, just because you're dealing with a whole different animal with that type of focal length. 2,000 millimeter focal length, right on C8. Some of the just in general, what kind of field of view are we talking about? Planets are very, very small. There's points of light in the sky, basically. And the maximum size that we can see Mars is around 25 seconds, 25 arc seconds. It's typically not that big. That's only every 40 or 50, 80 years, whatever it gets that big. Jupiter is the large, well, not the largest, actually. Getting close to one arc minute. Saturn. Then Venus is just over an arc minute. Venus is up right now in the evening sky. It's a bright star to the west. And then we start coming up, the moon is 34 minutes, a little over half a degree, so everybody knows how big the moon is. And then we start going up, the Orion Nebula is a degree and a half by a degree, the full extent of the nebula. And then we get into the Andromeda Galaxy. It's quite big. We can see the Andromeda Galaxy naked eye, especially here. It's a kind of like a fuzzy patch, but it's not nearly as big as it is. But we're just seeing the galactic core. It would be great if we actually could see the Andromeda Galaxy, because it takes up so much. It's like 6 moons long. Imagine seeing that in the night sky. I've heard this is anecdotal information. The giant squid, they live in the deep ocean, and sometimes they'll come to the surface, and their eye is almost 10, 11 inches. I can imagine if they actually come to the surface at night, what they actually see, that big of an eye. And then we get into Barnard's Loop, which goes around the Orion constellation. That's 10 degrees, so we're getting a good chunk of the sky now. And then, of course, the Milky Way. Last night, we could almost see horizon to horizon. It was a great night last night. And heading towards Thomas and Davis, because of moisture in the air, the stars close to the horizon were being overwhelmed by the sky work, all the dampness in the air. I've mentioned these already. If you've never done anything, the easiest is just taking a tripod, setting it up, the lens, and shooting at the Milky Way. That's a great way to get started. You can take individual images, or you can do a time lapse over time, and bring that into a video and create a little time lapse video. I'll give you a quick example of that. So this was done on dolly sods a year ago in April. So last year in April. And this was just setting up the camera with on a tripod and just taking 20, 25-second exposures over about a 3-hour period. And towards the end here, you can see you can see the planes and stuff, of course, but occasionally you'll see this stuff that's kind of going through it. It's like almost like a greenish glow. At first, I thought that actually some aurora, and actually what it was is oxygen, ionized oxygen in the atmosphere. It's hard to see on the projector, but those are fairly easy. Free tools to create the final video. You just take images and load them into the tool and let it create the final video file. So time lapse is pretty easy to do. That's a great way to get started. You don't have anything to track and that kind of stuff. You can also do star trails. The one image that I showed of the Green Bank telescope had a little bit of star trailing to it. I have another one, several hours worth of star trails. That's another free tool that you can download. So you sit there and you're just taking like pictures of Polaris, the North Star, and do that for like 3 hours, and then bring that into that free tool, Star Stats, I think it's called Star Stats, and it will create those star trails. That's a nice result as well. If you're going to time lapse, try to get the lens as wide as possible. The wider the lens, the longer the exposure before you start seeing star trailing, because the Milky Way is moving. So if you get something that's like this lens, we can go down to like 11 millimeters. You can go full 30 seconds and just have a minimal amount of star trail. If you're using a lens like that one on that camera, 24, you're really limited to no more than 20 seconds because you start getting a significant amount of star trail. But if you're doing time lapse, it still looks nice as you're stitching it together to a video. And the rule of thumb is 20 images for 1 second of video. So it takes quite a number of exposures to get something that's any decent length. So 10 seconds, you're talking 200 images. If you want to go 30 seconds, that's 600 images. So just take lots and lots of images. The other thing, if you're going to be doing Milky Way, set your ISO settings up high. Since we're taking short exposures, you can kind of push the ISO, the gain on your camera. So last night on the T5i, I haven't looked at the data yet. I was shooting at 3200 on the ISO. And for this camera, I was shooting 2000. This does well at 2000. Very noisy. Some of the older cameras, if you're shooting at 3200, they get a little bit noisy. But the newer cameras are so electronics and the technology is so much better now. Really low noise cameras. You can really start pushing the ISO to some extent. Pretty easy. Of course, if you're doing anything long exposure, you need something that tracks. So this mount tracks, so it's got both the brightness engine, all the sky through the night, as well as the declination for the go-to capability. And if you're not quite perfectly full aligned, you can have your auto guider adjust your declination as well. But this, like I said, this is big, bulky, quite heavy. Is that the GTI?
Yeah, that's sort of right.
Is that the two, like the 2i?
2i.
Yeah, so on this one, my son has this one right here. You can see the difference. This is easily transported. Fairly light, sturdy, robust, but nowhere near as heavy as that. And I've taken this to my carry-on. I think Terry was mentioning yesterday, she takes her stuff here on there. Travel with this type of setup, where there's no way I would try to take that thing anywhere, except in a car. I would not try to take any of this type of gear on a plane. I'd take a tripod, take a mount pad like that, start with your 2i or the GTI. Those are great for travel options. I actually did at one point in time make my own barn door mount. It worked okay. If you're like, I like to tinker, I like making. So it was more of a challenge. Can I make a barn door? There's all kinds of plans out there. But there's lots of options out there. And before the Star Tracker, Astro Tracker, the Sky Adventure, those are affordable options now, whereas before there were no real options for that type of quality capability. I've already mentioned this, but these are my go-to lenses. I have them all up here. If anybody wants to come up afterwards and take a look. It's a mixture of Nikon lenses and Sigma lenses plus a Tokine. These all work well for my purpose. So I already did the image. I think I've already got through all the So this was done at Green Bank as well. So during the Green Bank Star Quest, and that radio telescope that you're seeing is a small one. It's not very big, but it's a solar. It actually tracks the sun, pulling off radio data from the sun as it goes to the sky during the day. But it made a nice shot, just lined up perfectly with, not perfectly, close to perfectly with the celestial pole, and that's like 3 hours worth of time lapse, and then use that star stacks tool to create the time for your star feed or your star tracks. Now, last night, I'll show you, I've got a couple of minutes here. Last night, I did get some data, and so this was a hastily processed image this morning. You know, so it needs more work. This was and I haven't stretched it or anything yet. That's just the raw stacked data coming out of the camera. I use Astrophotography processor to do this. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to follow Nico's tutorial, and I'm going to do the same thing with Cyril. See how, I like some of the processing tools that Cyril has, like the gradient portion, the green eliminator. There's a Photoshop tool that you can run on Windows versions of Photoshop, green exterminator. I can't run it on Mac. But that's just the raw stacked data, which I haven't done yet. Something happened here. I have no idea what happened. You can see that either I hit the mount or something got squirrely during the imaging. I had to throw away about 4 frames because it either quit tracking or I don't know what happened. But it started tracking again, so I'm not sure what happened. You can see I've got this little offset here. So this was the first part I did. That's an hour's worth of data. And then I switched over to a different part of the sky, and this is about 45 minutes. I do it over. I didn't get my full hour. That's why you're seeing a little bit of a line here. These images aren't quite the same amount of data. But this is showing, you know, here's the North American, there's the butterfly, here's the Bell complex up in here, and we've got the elephant head down here, and lots of dark areas. And that one image I showed earlier was a processed image. It really brings out some of that dark parts. Yes, this was with the 85 millimeter. Now this is a processed image of that same region, and it looks better on the left. Don't have the dynamic range, but you can see there's lots of dark dust in the way. You know, this is not void. There's no stars there behind the dust. You know, if it looked like this, there was no dust in it. So get a lot of the dark nebula, kind of all the way through that whole image. This would be a great, 3 or 4 hours worth of data, and just pull that stuff out, and get all that background flux. This is just that's an 85 millimeter. That's what it's field of view is. From Cygnus over towards the hill. So that's kind of it for the first part. I'll put my Jeremy hat on and do the next one. Before we do that, does anybody have any questions about astrophotography getting started? Yes.
You had mentioned match library, you can also use it to lighten pictures. It works well for that as a motion detection, and it works well for doing fireworks.
I've never tried it for fireworks, but I have done it with the lighting, because it does do the motion detection. Kind of goes to the live view mode, and then it looks for any quick changes in the picture. It's pretty cool.
And then also on the Milky Way, you have a 3D software called Sprayer or Sector. Everybody knows it, but you can use that for your Milky Way pictures to stack them, and it does a really good job.
Okay.
You can block out stuff. It's free software, and it looks great. So you can do 30-second exposures, 12 or 20 or whatever you stack them all together. So really easy to use. Just do little settings and you can use it. It looks great.
Yeah. I haven't tried it with ASI or Flash yet. You can create a plan and do the same thing, except you set a plan and let it just go do its thing. I haven't tried that yet. Any other questions? Okay, let's just go ahead and jump into the eclipse. Jeremy was going to do the eclipse stuff, and I don't know what he was going to do, so I'll do what I did at Green Bank. So if you saw it at Green Bank, sorry. This is the last minute kind of thing. So before we do that, let me just show. I'll show the 2017 data that I got for the eclipse. Some of the data. So I created some montages of the images. So you can see different parts of the eclipse. So start kind of from the left. That's called the diamond ring. That's right before totality. So you're just a little tiny sliver of the sun still visible, and then it gets smaller and smaller, and you can get into what they call the Bailey's beads, and that's where, particularly on this image, what we're getting is sunlight coming through the mountains on the moon. So the moon's not perfectly flat, but it has mountains. So as the sun's sneaking behind there, there's still sun coming through the clouds, the mountains. So they call that Bailey's beads, because you're getting little parts of it. And you can see on the image over on the left, there's the lower left, there's a little gap, it looks like, and then the top part, there's a gap. Then you get into totality, and you can see the corona, which I'll show here in a second. You can see the corona naked eye. And you start coming out of totality, and you start getting the reverse. You get Bailey's beads, and then you get diamond ring, and then you're out of totality. So these are some of the corona images processing multiple images, it's stitched together. That's just the different exposures. As you can see, it's going through and taking multiple pictures. And then I start building up the corona. This is like a 2-second exposure, so it's really overexposed, and you just take a series of those. And but how do we do this? How do we get these pictures? The first thing that I'll say, and this is what I said at Green Bank, is how to image without missing the event with your own eyes. Do not be, if you go to the 2024 eclipse, which I highly recommend it, you want to be close. It's going to go from like Cleveland down to Texas. Find someplace along the eclipse line, get there from April of 2024. Go someplace where it's clear. Forecast to be clear, you might have to make last minute drive, 500 miles to go someplace. But do it. If you've never seen an eclipse, this is the last one for a while. So try to get there. For the purpose of looking up, do not be fiddling around with your camera during the eclipse because you'll miss it. It's an awe-inspiring event. Who's been to a total eclipse? So a good portion of you have. So you understand, you don't want to be looking down, you want to be looking up and experience the event, especially if you're in a big group of people. So the purpose of this is how, if I want to try to capture the data, how can I do the same type of gear it's normally used for nighttime because you have to be tracking. This is a long event, it takes a while for it to occur. So you need to be tracking through the period. I was using DSLRs. You don't have to use whatever imaging camera that you have. But the tools that I use for the automation work with DSLRs. Telephoto lenses or small telescopes, you don't want to have something, you want to catch the corona. You want to get the extent of what's happening with the atmosphere of the sun. So you don't want to go too narrow. Keep a fairly wide field. All the pictures I showed were either with a 180 millimeter telephoto lens or a 300 millimeter telephoto lens. That's what I'm going to be using this to go around as well. If you're using a small telescope, keep it in the 300 and 400 millimeter max because you're too close to the sun and you won't be seeing the corona. And of course, solar filters for your lenses. Up until totality, you need to keep a filter on your camera, or you run the risk of destroying heat up, melt circuitry. Here. You can get the Vader film, Vader Planetarium. You can make your own lens cover. You can buy a pre-made for your particular lens setup. You can also get 1,000 Oaks Optical as a film. The Vader is a white, so when you see the image of the sun, it's going to be white, whereas 1,000 Oaks is more of an orange color. So you can pick whichever one, or use one of each, blend them however you want to. I would start sourcing that now if you want to. When it gets closer, it'll start becoming scarce. People start buying. It'll be harder to get. And don't use any knockoffs. Get Vader Planetarium or the 1,000 Oaks Optical. So you can get that on Amazon or any of the stores. High Point, all those places. Here, or pre-made filters. Automate the process. The primary goal is it's hands-off. We don't want to be doing anything. The only time you need to get engaged is to remove the filter. And the software that you will tell you when it's time to remove the filter. So you're sitting there, you've got your glasses on, your solar glasses, and you're looking up, you're watching everything, you're almost to totality, and all of a sudden you'll hear a beep. And all that beeping is over here, take the filter off. And that's all you need to worry about. And then you'll later on, 4 or 5 minutes later, in this particular eclipse, you'll hear another beep to tell you to put the filter back on. So it's the only thing you have to be worry about in this particular style is taking the filter off. And what we're trying to capture are those images I showed earlier, the diamond ring, Bailey's beads, totality. You can use a laptop to control your camera. The laptop knows what time it is. The laptop knows where you need to tell the laptop where you are. The accurate GPS coordinates, because if you're 100 miles away, the timing of the events are different. Totality happens at a different time, 100 miles away, than it does at your point, your location. So you need to let the laptop know what your GPS coordinates are. And you can run one of these two pieces of software. I've not used them. My plan was this year to use the Eclipse Maestro, but it's my understanding that they're not going to update it for the newer versions of the Mac, so I might have to go to Eclipse Orchestrator. Yes.
So I was gonna use, I think, for APT, Astrophotography tool, and the backyard EOS. You just have to program your events and pick that.
So APT and then backyard EOS.
Backyard EOS, backyard EOS is not free, but APT is a free demo, had some success.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. I'll take a look.
But that's free, the demo is free.
Okay. And then the last go around, I used Magic Lantern. And Magic Lantern, as I mentioned, it's a program that loads on your camera after it boots up. So it's not firmware replacement; it's firmware augmentation. Just adding some additional features on top of the existing firmware that's in the camera. And one of those options is the ability to run scripts. So there's a script that you get, and you edit the script file, and you put all the event times. Totality starts at my location at 12:01 p.m. 13 seconds. And so you put all these events for first contact, you know, the sun first touches the moon, that's first contact, and then you've got second contact, which is totality, and then you've got coming out of totality, and you have final contact. But all those events in there, and it will, you give it the correct time and the correct location that you're in, all those parameters, and it will do those sequences of image capture.
You see, if you don't want to use a computer, you can get an intervalometer that does exposure ramping. So it'll ramp up the exposure so you get the different degrees of the frame.
Yeah. They can do that too, and just turn it on so that it's a turn stick.
Because the exposure ramping automatically.
Yeah, and you can, and there's some tables and charts. If you're interested in doing it, these are two excellent sites for information. Jerry Rodriguez, astropix.com, and Fred Espenak, MrEclipse.com. They have all kinds of detail. Exposures, what type of lens are you using, what's the f-stop of your lens or your telescope. This is the exposures you need in order to capture the diamond ring. You have to the 4,000th of a second at f8. For this particular focal length. So it gives you all those charts that you can look at to match your equipment to the proper exposures, so that you're not either underexposing or overexposing. And
So for a partial or annular eclipse, how do you deal with, like, for example, sensor dust versus focal length? like, for example, the June 2021 eclipse, I had like a chunk of dust on the sensors. Like every single photo has a splotch on it. But the photos with the telephoto lens, you can't see it. But the photos with the telescope, it's much more obvious. So the shorter the focal length, the less likely the dust will be in front of the sun. And so and I was thinking maybe for the October eclipse, I'm going to have to, clean the sensor and then kind of not use the camera until the eclipse, kind of, or how do you do it?
Just keep it clean, and you can, even with that, you can still do some flat image processing.
Oh, you can take it out.
Because you can still probably process it out flat.
So on the sun, it's very obvious.
Yeah, and the longer the focal length, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to test.
I use about 1,000 millimeters to get the sun.
Yeah, if you ever want to test and see how much dust you have on your sensor, just use a lens and stop it down. Like this one, go down to f32 and take an image at f32, and it'll show you every speck of dust you have on your sensor. If you ever want to look at that, just stop it down with a really tight focal length. We can go out to Jerry's site for this, and then Mr. Eclipse. Both those sites are good resources. I'll show you a chart. Using that file that I was showing earlier. So here's this is from, I think it's from Jerry's site. So it gives you all the stuff, depending on the ISO you're shooting at and the f-stop, then it gives you the corresponding shutter speeds for each of those different events that you're capturing. So you would use this type of chart to enter into the software that you're using based on your equipment. It'll be different for everybody. You're using different lens, different f-stop, different cameras, different ISOs. So just you can follow that little guide. So as I mentioned, don't mess around with your equipment during the eclipse. Set it up and walk away, except for when you take the photo. Last thing you want to be doing is looking down and everybody around you is oohing and awing, and you're sitting there trying to fiddle around and your battery's dead, out of focus, and you're getting frustrated. Don't worry about it. There's a million people taking pictures. So you'll see the pictures. Just look at it.
So you're using a German equatorial now. How often do you have to realign on the sun? Like for the drift? If you have clips that go over an hour.
Not that much. The important part is just during the totality part, it's only like 5 or 6 minutes.
So obviously for the entire.
But if you're doing the whole thing, I didn't touch it.
Oh, okay.
I started with the 300 millimeter, I think. It was kind of over here on the left side, and by the time it was done, it was over on the right side.
No, for a partial angle, when you close up, it's no longer. Like I said,
If you're going longer, then
mine, I have to adjust it every 15 minutes.
if your mount will do solar tracking,
Yeah.
turn solar tracking. Otherwise, you're going to have to nudge it to go off.
Plus, I had to get the solar quest because I got the star seeker. You have to realign it every 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
You have a long focal length.
Yeah, I was using wide field, so it just moved across the frame. But if you're zooming in using most of your sensor, then you'll constantly have to either touch the hand controller just nudge it with it. Or if you can do solar tracking.
The solar quest auto guides the sun.
So, anybody have any questions about doing eclipse imaging?
about the eclipse, but, I'm not sure where there's the day on next year, on the day before the total solar eclipse, it's gonna be a lunar occultation of Venus. And so you're doing, you said you're doing planetary images with the DSLR camera, right?
Yes.
So how do you capture the images? During the daytime, it's obviously much more difficult. Like, do you use a computer software or use video or how do you
I just use video in the camera. So I just put it in video mode
Okay.
and then put
Using
a,
the internal video, you're not using like an external capture.
no, I'm just using internal video on the camera. And also, this is my guy camera is the ASI 224, which is a planetary camera. So sometimes I'll use this as well. But that image Jupiter was taken with the Canon RP.
Okay.
In video mode. So just straight video. And you just get the, I'm typically shooting 6,000 millimeter. I've got CD.
Have you done lunar occultations before?
I've never tried it.
Okay, they're day and night. They happen anytime. So you have the moon. It's trying to figure out the focal length. Would it be better if you get a shorter focal length or a longer focal length, or just use a preference? Or?
For the moon, if I go with my C8 on the full frame, I can get most of the moon on the sensor.
Yeah.
And
So
so,
better a full desk.
but I'll just push it over to the side. If I want to go closer and get more details of the plan, then I'll put a Barlow on it and go, your 4,000, 6,000. I'll put 2x or 3x Barlow.
Well, the other issue is if you're doing that in the daytime, I don't think you can use a Barlow because the magnification is too high, right?
Should be able to.
What?
Should be able. There shouldn't be any reason why you wouldn't.
Because the turbulence in the daytime.
Oh, and I'm so used to the turbulence at nighttime around here that it's
Okay, but in the daytime, it's going to be much worse. A little,
And that's when you want to use a different camera, like the ASI
Just want the
224,
fastest capture rate.
because you can capture up to 100 frames a second. That
I don't want to get
yeah, I'm always fighting seeing here, even at night. Every time I image Jupiter, it's like I'm looking at something down a highway on a hot summer day. It's just bounce. It's always a challenge.
I tried to do the lunar occultation of Mercury last year, and I couldn't find a new moon in the daytime. It's really difficult. Like even in the microscope, I couldn't see it.
Yeah, that's tough. Any other questions? So if you do try, like I said, do some reading, do some prep, run through whatever process you're going to do. You do it during the daytime, put your filter on in the sun. There's not going to be an eclipse, but just go through the process. Make sure everything's working okay. Make sure that you're using a laptop that's communicating, software's working okay. If you're using Magic Planner, make sure it's working properly. So do some dry runs, and then the day that it happens, push the button multiple ways. I'll keep saying that. Now until April. Good luck with it if you try. So I'm going to do a trial run. We're going out to Moab for the end. I've never done an end, so that'll be my first one. Yes.
One thing, this year we solar glasses certification for the safety picture finding solar glasses. We certified 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, show they have been checked for safety, recognition. Amazon last year had a major rush and they sold them safety glasses. And so this year, all safety glasses should be marked with that certification. Just to make sure they're safe.
Yeah.
Terry, can you repeat that number? Yeah, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 dash 2. A lot of times you can see the ISO certification. You don't think that's manufacturer also called us, and I don't know if this is the manufacturer makes money. They said that the shoulder filters can be drained a little bit over since 2017 to buy new solar glasses for. I don't know if that's one big thing or what.
I think that's the dash one, you can't use after a certain number of years, the dash two, you can use. Multiple passes. Yeah, if you want the dash two. The dash one, you can't use for more than 3 minutes at a time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you stepping in for Jeremy there for storage clips. I did download the Maestro snapshot on my Mac, and it is Intel based, but the preview wouldn't come up, so it needed to be updated about the manufacturer. So I don't know if it's compatible.
That'd be an old version.
Yeah, Mac OS. I think Snow Leopard is what it's looking for. But we are a little bit early, so right now, lunch is scheduled for 12 to 1. We'll go ahead and break for lunch. And then if you'll be back in your seats just prior to 1, we'll kick things off again with Abraham Jones and beginning of the Fix Inside. So we'll see everybody back at 1. Thank
My
you.
eyeballs hurt now.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I'm just saying.